welcome. Good afternoon. We're so happy to have you at Jumpstart's monthly expert-led webinar series. Today with Julie Maurer from SilverLine Consulting. Julie, is that pronounced correctly? Maurer?
That's correct.
Perfect.
Maurer, yep.
From SilverLine
Hi,
Consulting and being compliant as you grow your team, which I'm sure some of you are thinking of or doing. I'm Lauren Smith-Petta. I serve as Jumpstart's Director of Education. We strive to provide you with access to the knowledge and resources you need to make your small businesses bigger and better. Visit our website to explore some of our other educational opportunities for small businesses and tech companies. Before I continue to introduce Julie today, a few housekeeping items. This presentation session will likely be 60 to 90 minutes with time set aside for Q&A. Our presenter may ask you to participate throughout, so please place your comments in the chat. Please make sure your responses are going to everyone, not just hosts and panelists. We want your fellow attendees to be able to see as well, and you may need to make this change or selection in the chat. You can also see the Q&A, which is a great place to put your questions as they occur to you, and we'll either address them in real time if they're time sensitive, or we will be sure to address them in the Q&A at the end. At the end of today's session and in a follow-up email, you'll receive the slides, the recording, several resources that Julie wants to provide to you, as well as a brief survey. We appreciate your feedback. It allows us to continue to bring in experts and entrepreneurs to teach valuable lessons. All right, without further ado, allow me to introduce our presenting subject matter expert today, Julie Maurer. She is the president of SilverLine Consulting, which she launched 13 years ago this month. Happy anniversary. SilverLine is a human resources and recruiting consultancy, small but mighty team of 7, working with dozens of small businesses, including small startups and nonprofits. Through HR consultancy, Julie and team are often the acting head of HR for a company too small to employ a full-time or even part-time HR resource. Through the recruiting arm, SilverLine Consulting places around 100 people each year nationwide, many in small businesses like yours, and across all positions from an EA to a CEO. Julie is also a preferred partner in the Jumpstart Network. So here we have my favorite kind of subject matter expert, an entrepreneur who serves entrepreneurs. Julie, thank you so much for being here. Over to you and welcome.
Thank you. So hi, everyone. I have to tell you, this is absolutely my first webinar. I normally do this session in person, which I prefer rather than talking to myself. So I'm going to do my best to make this as interesting and interactive as I possibly can, given the subject matter. And I would just ask that you please participate as well. If we ask you to put something in the chat, or if you have a question, that you raise it. That's going to make this more effective for you personally. So Lauren did a great job at introducing me. And I just want to say that as an HR professional, this is the subject matter that bores me the most. So I can only imagine it's going to bore you as well, but it's necessary. It's a necessary evil. I want to introduce you to the materials that we have for you today. I'm going to be showing a presentation that has a lot of live links in it, with the intent that it will be sent to you afterwards and you can use those live links. The goal today is that you leave here with everything you need to be compliant if you're not already. And if you are, well, then this will just be a good reinforcement that you are, because not everyone always knows all the things that they need to do. So normally I share ridiculous videos, I bribe my audiences with donuts, and I can't do any of those things today. However, where I want to kind of introduce you to my space, I'm sitting in my office at home. I love to read, as you could probably see. And I thought I would tell all of you, I'm currently reading Chatter, which has been great so far. This book is about the chatter in your head and how to harness it. And I highly recommend it because it's been very helpful to me so far. So I'm an avid reader. I've read all of the stuff back there, and I go through about a book a week. So this is what I'm reading now. Okay. So what I want to say is that today's focus is on companies of 50 or less. Now, everyone has to do all the things that we're talking about, no matter how big you are. So if there is anyone on this call that is over 50, it still applies. But what I'm focusing on is 50 or less. And if you're over 50, unfortunately, there's more compliance stuff. So just wanted to put that out to you. So before I get started, what I would like is for everyone to take 1 minute and put in the chat the following items. I would like to know your name, your title, your company, and the number of employees you have on staff. So I'm going to pause, just really quickly throw that in the chat so I can see who I'm dealing with, and then we'll get started. I want to see your name, your title, your company, and the number of employees you have. Please. There we go. Okay, so far what I'm seeing is we've got a mix. We've got right now anywhere from 3 to 30 people. So that's good for me to know, and welcome everyone. So I'm going to share my screen so that you can see my presentation. And here we go. So I introduced myself, you introduced yourself. I appreciate that. My goals for today are, like I said, to make sure that you leave here knowing everything you need to be compliant. If at any point throughout this presentation you've got questions, you can throw them in the Q&A. I will be pausing throughout, and Lauren will be sharing any questions that come up, and I'll answer them real time. So the things we're going to cover first are what determines if an individual is a 1099 contractor or employee. And the reason we're going to talk about that first is because everything else we're going to talk about is about the employee. And contractors are sort of separate. If you don't have any employees, then you don't have to do any of these things. So a lot of companies don't exactly know how to determine if they have a contractor or an employee working for them. And so I first want to talk about that. One thing I want to share with you is that there is a handout that should have been emailed to you this morning. I want to show it to you here. And this is the compliance checklist. These are all of the things that we're going to go through today. And the intent here is if you can check all of these things off of your list, then you are in fact compliant. If you're under 50, which it sounds like everyone is. So this compliance checklist goes right along with all of the topics that we're going to talk about today, if you want to have that in front of you. Okay, so let's talk about 1099 contractors versus employees. Generally speaking, and this is a resource to you, you are a contractor if you have the control, and you're an employee if your employer has the control. So think about an employee on your team, and if they truly should be an employee, that means you're setting their hours and their schedule, you're inspecting their work and giving them things like performance reviews. They may have signed off on a handbook if you have one. They are required to uphold any policies of the company, and you provide the tools and equipment. Where on the other end of things, a contractor, they are setting their own work schedule. They're not monitored on a regular basis. They don't receive performance evaluations. They may work for other businesses. So I share this with you because it is important how someone is distinguished. The IRS says you need to be claiming all of your employees. And if you're calling them contractors, that might not be, you may not be paying all the appropriate taxes and workers' comp fees on them. So it matters. And so again, today's focus is on the employee. Before I move on and we start talking about employees and how to be compliant once you have them, does anybody have any questions about the topic of contractors versus employees?
Nothing in the Q&A, Julie.
Okay. And like I mentioned, there's going to be lots of resources within the deck that you'll see when you get it. On this slide specifically, there's some really good resources if you are debating if someone's a contractor or an employee. So, and I always can be of service to you too, and you can ask me if you need any help.
Julie, could you reshare your slides? It just stopped sharing is all.
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So on the topic of hiring and employment files, this is sort of the first section of things you need to think about. On the bottom of each slide, what you're going to see are the laws that put this requirement in place. So you know that it's not just Julie Maurer pontificating around what you should do. These are laws that require you as employers to do them. This is pretty simple. In the world of hiring and employment files, when you hire, you need employees to fill out 3 forms. The first is the I-9, and that needs to be done within 3 days of them being hired. Again, there's a live link here to the I-9 form, and at this link, it will stay always current because these forms do change over time, but these links are where they're housed sort of globally. So an I-9 form, W-4 form, and then you need to report them to the IRS in their state. And the link to the portal is where you do that. So those 3 things need to happen every time you hire someone. And then you need files. So there's 3 files that you need to think about. You need an I-9 file, a file that all the I-9s go into. I personally put those in a file. You can do it electronically. You could do it paper if you really want to. I'd alphabetize them just to keep it simple for as you grow. And if you have 30 employees, it's easy to put your hands on them quickly. Then you should have an employment file for every employee. In that employment file are things like their application, all their financial stuff, so their W-4, any performance reviews, if they signed off on a handbook, their offer letter, if you had them sign an NDA or confidentiality agreement, all of those things should go in that file too. Again, it can be electronic.
Julie,
The last
we have a
file is
time-sensitive question.
okay. Let's hear it.
So it's pertaining to 1099 contractors. Someone said, how does a 1099 contractor maintain control when you, the employer, have specific hours of work and specific tasks for the contractor to perform?
So if you and there's a little bit of nuance here, but if you are, let's say, an organization that runs events, and you have events on Sundays, and they're Sundays from 12 to 7, you can engage contractors that are available during 12 to 7. They understand that's when you need them. They're saying, I'm available. But if next Sunday something comes up for them and they let you know they can't work during that time, well, then they just don't work during that time. So I don't know if I addressed the question. I'll pause for a second and see if there's any follow-up to it. But you can dictate if you have hours of opening when they would work, if they are in fact agreeable.
No follow-ups yet. I'll keep you
Okay,
posted.
so I'm going to keep going and we can come back to that for sure. And just so you guys know, all of you, if anyone has a really nuanced situation to any of the items we're going to talk about today, I'm going to be giving you my contact information at the end, and we can connect offline for sure. So I just want you to know and have that in your back pocket as well. So the last of the 3 files that you need to keep in mind to have for employees is a medical information file. Because of HIPAA laws and the ADA Act, Americans with Disabilities Act, benefit, medical, injury, and workers' comp information needs to be kept separate from the employment file. The reason why is the medical information file should only be accessed by one person. If you have an HR person, that's you. If you're small, it's probably the owner or the CEO. Whereas employment files could be something that a hiring manager or a supervisor could look at to see the employee's last performance review. Medical information, on the other hand, is protected. So we don't want everyone knowing that an employee was late because they had a doctor's appointment about XYZ illness. So that's why there's 3 different kinds of files. What I will tell you is a lot of your employees won't have a medical file unless you're offering medical benefits, which we're going to talk about next. In the case where you're offering benefits, you'd put all of their forms in this medical information file. In the case where you're not, you don't really need a medical information file for your employee until there's something to actually house in it. At that time, you'd create one. So I would always recommend that you review your I-9 file annually. When you put this together for the first time, or if you have one today, you should look at it annually to make sure that none of the documentation provided by the employees has expired. For example, if I give you my license, but my license expires tomorrow, the day after that, my I-9 is not good anymore. And believe it or not, there are auditors that go around and collect your I-9 files on the spot, and every error, an expired document, for example, is a $1,000 fine. I've been through one of these audits and passed it. But I want you to know it is something that can happen, and $1,000 an error can add up pretty quickly. So I would encourage you to look at this file annually and mark your calendar, or use some other system to remind yourself when there's going to be something expiring, a passport or whatnot. And then these files need to be retained for 4 years after an employee exits. So just keep that in mind. Before I move on, I'm going to pause and see if there are any questions on the files, the forms, or I'll even open it back up to the contractor question if there's any follow-ups there. Okay. We're going to talk about benefits next. Benefits overall is, I guess, my first topic. So small companies have a choice. Not all small companies offer benefit plans. When they do, I've seen a couple of different ways by which companies will give access to their employees, access to benefits to their employees. A couple of ways are a group plan where you engage with a broker, you bring in benefits, and you as the employer pay a portion of the benefit costs and pass off the rest of the portion to employees. In that case, which that is not a requirement, but in that case, that is something that can be offered to any employee that works 30 hours or more a week and are considered, in the eyes of like the benefits gurus, full-time. So that's one way. I've also seen companies offer a stipend of some kind when they're small, with the goal of offsetting that benefit cost, but not having a group plan and putting one in place right away. It doesn't always make sense for early stage companies that maybe don't have as much runway. So there's options out there. Now, in the world of benefits, I'm just going to remind you, you have 3 files that you have to have on each employee. We talked about the I-9 file, the employment file. The medical information file is where any benefits information would be housed about an employee, because their personal medical information would be there. The only benefits requirements that employees over 20 have to adhere to are with COBRA notices. And so if you are over 20 and you have a group plan, when someone leaves, they need to be provided with a COBRA notice. Most benefit providers, so call it Medical Mutual or your broker like an Oswald, they'll send those on your behalf, but you do need to make sure they're going out. And what that does is that lets the employee that has exited opt to continue their benefits for a period of time at their own cost, but they don't lose access to the plan. So really, that's the only benefit requirement for employees under 20, really even under 50. Are there any questions on benefits before I move on? The next topic is employment posters. If you have even one employee and you don't have employment posters, you need them. So when you get this, there'll be a link right to the most inexpensive, and I've gotten great service from the Labor Law Compliance Center. You need to post state and federal posters in a conspicuous place, such as a break room or main hallway, somewhere where everyone passes by. And then you need to make sure they're kept up to date. And what's on these posters, if you've never seen them before, if you're not sure, are workers' comp laws, OSHA requirements, minimum wage laws, and it's putting information, legal requirement information in front of your employees, just so that if they have any questions about those things, they know where to go. So when you click on this link, what you'll see is that you can pick what state you're in, and then you can purchase, and I would recommend this, the 3-year option, where you'll get your labor posters and then they'll update them every time there's an update to any federal or state law in your state, and they'll resend them to you. And then you don't have to think about it for a couple of years. If you have multiple sites, it's your main quote unquote headquarters that needs these posted. And if your employees are remote, there's a remote option so that you have the ability to point them to a place where they are online and they can see all the same things, even though there's not a physical location. I'm going to pause here and see if there's any questions on employment posters.
We do have a good question, Julie. Patty asked, is the owner considered employee under poster requirements?
It depends on your structure. If you are an S Corp, if you're an LLC, if you're a C Corp, the answer is different in all of those cases. Or if you're just a founder, owner. So your legal structure does impact that. I would tell you this, I'm an owner, and when I just started my company, I didn't have those posters anywhere. And there wasn't a site for anyone to come check on me and make sure that I had. Once you have a physical office outside of your home and you have a second person, that's when it's time for sure. Outside of that, you would need to ask your attorney based on your legal structure. If you are truly an employee or if you are simply an owner or partner. In some structures, owners and partners are not considered employees. They're owners or partners.
Thank you. That's the only open question I see right now.
Okay. So we're going to move on to wage and hour compliance. There's a couple of things you need to do from an FLSA or Fair Labor Standard Act perspective. And all of these items are on those posters, for example. So the first one is actually often what catches people because it's sort of a deciding factor, and that's if your employees are exempt versus non-exempt. You need to make sure that status is correct because that determines how they're paid, how their time off works, all of those types of things. Now, one of the handouts that was sent to you is an FLSA guide. And on that FLSA exemption guide, it explains that what exempt status is and what non-exempt status is. Generally, if you're exempt, meaning you're exempt from the Federal Labor Standards Act, you're exempt from overtime pay. You don't get overtime. You are paid as a salaried employee, and you must be paid at a certain pay threshold. So right now, that pay threshold is $35,568 annually. So what that means is if you're calling someone a salaried employee, they have to make at least $35,568, and they don't get things like overtime, those types of things. You know, they don't get meal breaks, those kinds of things that an hourly employee would. Whereas if you are a non-exempt employee, often referenced as hourly, that means you are eligible for time and a half on overtime. and you are paid hourly. This might not seem like a big deal, but what has happened in the past are big mammoth companies like Walmart, for example, have had situations where employees, masses of employees, hundreds of people, realized that they should have been being paid overtime, but they were being paid salaried. And they took that to a lawyer, and there was a class action lawsuit, and Walmart was responsible for back paying all the overtime pay they had not paid because the employees, in fact, should have been paid that way. So that's why it matters. Because if someone is salaried, they work as many hours as is needed to do the job. And if they're hourly, they should be eligible for overtime. So in the exemption guide that I sent you, and that will also be included in the materials as a follow-up to this, it explains by role how to determine if someone is exempt versus non-exempt. The most common time I see this come into question is with an administrative assistant. There are some administrative assistant jobs that are exempt and some that are non-exempt. And the types of things that determine that are they paid at least $6.84 weekly, which is the minimum? And then what are their duties? And when we say duties, if an individual is told what to do and they repeat the action over and over and over again, and they aren't using a lot of independent thought, that is typically a hourly or non-exempt employee. If they are using a lot of independent thought and decision making, that's typically a salaried employee. Now, I'm giving you a very high level synopsis of this. And if you have any roles on your team where you are not sure what they should be, I'd point you to the guide first. And if that doesn't answer your question, I certainly can help you through it offline. So before I move on from the exempt and non-exempt status portion of this slide, I just want to see if there's any questions. Is everyone awake? Because I just know that this is not the most riveting information you're going to hear today. That's for sure. But you need to know it, so pay attention. Okay, I'm going to move on. If there are any questions that come through, feel free to interrupt me, Lauren. So, assuming you know that you have a hourly or non-exempt employee, you need to make sure they're getting break and rest periods. You need to track and log their hours in a systematic way so you know what to pay them. And they are paid time and a half for overtime and holidays. And then you need to make sure, from a wage and hour compliance standpoint overall, that you're paid and your time off, any time off that you give any employee, hourly or salary, is equitably enforced, meaning everyone understands the holidays, everyone understands how much vacation and sick time they have. Now, I want to just put a caveat out there that on really small teams, there are certainly situations, you're 3 people, one's an owner. It's kind of like, do what you need to do. We don't have a handbook yet, kind of a thing. And that's okay, as long as you're giving everybody the opportunity to make that decision and not treating people differently. If you get to a certain size, I'd say once you're around 5 or 6 people, for sure, it's time to define when are your holidays, are there days that the company shuts down, and what should individuals do when they want vacation and sick time. And again, what's paid, what's not. And this is for exempt or non-exempt employees. And again, we're talking about employees. For contractors, you're not offering them holidays or vacation or sick time. The last thing from a wage and hour standpoint is ensure your employees are 18 years of age or older. You can employ someone between 16 and 18, but they need a work permit. And I would say in the types of businesses that you are all running, it's unlikely that you would go that route, but if you needed to, they just need to obtain a work permit. Any questions on wage and hour compliance?
Yes, we have a couple of questions.
Okay.
So Tammy asked, are 1099s required to be registered with the state?
So registered with the state in the manner that I shared before, from an IRS standpoint, not in the same method. They do need to fill out a W-9, so that at the end of the year, and that should be given to your accountant, so that at the end of the year, you have everything to provide them with a 1099. It's not registered with the state per se, but ultimately they're going to get a 1099 from you so that they can show how much they worked and were paid in their own personal taxes.
Thank you. Another question in here is, do any of these laws change if the employee is in a different state, for example, California?
Yes. So the exempt versus non-exempt status is what it is. But what the rest periods, what the break periods um, are dictated by state. So some states make you pay for 15-minute breaks and a lunch. Some states make you give those break periods, but they can be unpaid. I would say look it up if you're not sure what the rule is in your state, or ask me specifically, and I'll look it up. But the rest of this on this sheet is the same. These are the basics.
Thank you. Those are all the questions I see for now.
Next, this is a pretty simple one. It's policy requirements. So for companies of the size that we've been talking, that I think are on the line today, sounds like 30 or less, the only policy requirement comes in at 15 employees. And that is that you have a drug and alcohol abuse policy, documented and available to employees. So if you don't have one of those and you need one, you're going to be able to reach out to me afterwards and I can get you an example. So that's the only requirement. Now, what I recommend is that you have a handbook when the time is right that has this in it. And I would say 10 to 15 employees is around the time that a handbook makes sense. Handbook sometimes sends, I think people think legalese, 50 pages. I really don't want one of those. And I can tell you, I've created handbooks for startups that are 5 pages long. And all it's doing is making sure this policy is in there, then giving you a place to say, here's our holidays. Here's how you ask for time off. Here's what we do when you're sick. And, then it's a good time to put things in there like, we won't tolerate harassment. And here's what you do if you're feeling harassed. So kind of like the basics that give you and managers that you will hire somewhere to point to help them manage their team. So at the end of the day, when you're ready to create a handbook, I would suggest you have someone like me and or your employment attorney take a look at it. If your employment attorney is asked for a template, they're going to send you one that's 50 pages. I'm telling you that. So it would be good, I would say, to get with someone who's used to working with startups. So I'm going to pause there. There's one policy requirement at the size that we're talking about today. Are there any questions?
We do have a question from Katrina. She said, do you have to have a drug test policy that requires drug testing before hire, or can you have a policy that does on-the-spot drug testing?
Hi, Katrina. That's a good question. You can do whatever you would like. You can do it as a requirement or contingent upon, acceptance of the offer. They have to pass a drug test to be hired. So you can do it pre-employment, and you can also do it anytime you want to. You just have to let them know up front that that's the policy you have. You also don't have to do it at all. So that is completely a preference, company preference. Other questions?
None right now. Thank you.
I'm going to give you one caveat, Katrina, and for the rest of you. If you're a government-funded contractor or state agency, the answer to that may be different based on requirements that might be in your contract. So that would be the only caveat to what I just said. Okay, So the last thing we're going to talk about, and then we're going to open this up for any questions that anyone has, are employee separations. So, and again, going back to the state piece, this is for the state of Ohio. In the state of Ohio, final paychecks must be provided on the next scheduled payday or within 15 days of the person's exit, whichever comes first. So if you're an Ohio company, this is your rule. If you are located in a different state or your employee is located in a different state, you have to follow the rules of that state. Many states have this rule right here. Some are within 24 hours of the exit. It depends on the state. So just be aware, if you are a multi-state employer, that it would be a good thing to make sure you have that awareness of that. If you have an accounting firm or you're using a payroll system like Gusto or Rippling or anything like that, they are able to monitor that for you. That system would monitor that for you and give you an alert. Oh, you're saying this employee is exiting. We need to cut their check within a certain period of time. But you have to make sure that you're signed up for that service as well. So I say this because if you have a contentious exit, the employee, if not paid on time, could say, hey, that company didn't pay me on time. And it could be, sort of part of a case or anything like that. So it's good just to make sure you have awareness. And then if you're over 20 employees and you do offer that group benefit plan that we talked about before, that's where the COBRA notices have to be sent out. That third party would be doing it on your behalf. Typically, you're not physically sending these from your office, but you want to make sure that if you have more than 20 people and you have a group plan, that you are in fact set up with your benefit provider to have COBRA notices sent out on your behalf. I would also recommend that you have a process or a checklist for handling employee separation, something that you can reference every time someone leaves. Did I forward their email to someone else? Did I forward forward their cell phone to someone else? Did I alert all of their clients? Did I communicate to the whole company? So I would have a checklist of things that you do every time someone leaves, because sometimes when people leave, it can be a little emotional, or it might be at a very busy time. It might be abrupt. And it's good to have something to reference. Now, I wouldn't go and just create a checklist if you're 3 people and you don't think that anyone is going to be leaving. I would say to you, the next time someone leaves, create a checklist at that time. Do all the things that you do when you exit an employee and track it. And then you can add to it over time as you think of best practices in your organization. So on employee separations, are there any questions?
It's not quite related to that, but it's a relevant question. Belinda is wondering, what are requirements for work permits in Ohio?
A work permit for someone who is under 18? I guess I'm not. I mean, work permits are typically
She said
something
yes.
yes. So if you're going to employ someone that is under 18, then yes, they have to go apply for a work permit, and they have to provide a certain amount of documentation to be able to gain it. But it's on the student or the kid is who's responsible for filling out, applying for, and gaining a work permit. You can help them out and send them the link, and I will make sure you guys get the link to where to go to obtain a work permit, so you have it. But the work is on the to-be employee, not on you.
And her follow-up question is, how do they apply via state or county?
It's state, and I'll make sure that all of you have the link.
Thank you. That's all the questions we have right now.
So the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that you all see this last slide, because I want to talk about, I want to stop sharing and I want to talk with all of you. But what I want you to know is after today, if you have any follow-up questions on any of the content we talked about today or anything else HR related that you could use some help with, because you attended today, you would get a free 1-hour consultation with me. I'm an HR consultant. I work with companies of all shapes and sizes, but what I will tell you is most of my clients are under 50. So I've seen it all. I think I've seen it all. So if you need any help, you absolutely can reach out to me and I'll help you one-on-one. This will be in the deck that we send you afterwards, and this is how you get a hold of me. So now I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I want to open this up for any questions that anyone has. Also, I didn't ask at the beginning just because I was struggling to see the chat if what everyone's goals were. And so what I want to make sure is that whatever drew you to join today has been addressed. And if not, we have time. So I would say now a great time to ask any questions or bring up any topics that weren't covered that you may have questions on. So opening up for questions, both about the content or that were, on something that wasn't covered that you'd hoped would be.
So you folks are welcome to put your questions in a few places. You can put it in the chat. You can formally put it in the Q&A, or you're also welcome to raise your hand and I can unmute you and you can verbalize your question. Okay, we have one question in the chat so far. Is an employee handbook mandatory that is listing all these rules and regulations to get them signed by employees?
So the first time that something becomes a requirement is at 15 employees with that drug and alcohol policy. That's the first time that you need to have something in writing. There's no law out there that says you must have employees sign off on it. You must have employees have a handbook. However, the reason that you do that is because if you ever go to enforce what's in a handbook, you can say, we told employee that these were the rules and they broke them. And oh, by the way, they signed off that they received it. So while it's not mandatory, I would say at the point you are at 15, if you don't have a handbook, it's probably time. It might have been time before. You kind of know when it's time based on the number of questions you're getting, the number of rules you have on separate pieces of paper or rules you have in your head. And then it is a recommendation or best practice that employees sign off on it.
Great, thank you. Another question that came through, or comment/question, was my goal was to make sure I was hitting all the compliance topics. I think our company is in good shape as we are accredited and funded by agencies.
Got it. Good.
Just so you know, someone else said I have to leave at 1, but this was a huge help to really clarify some popular topics, and she looks forward to receiving the recording. What other questions do you folks have? You've got Julie's ear and expertise and wisdom at your disposal.
And certainly we'll make sure that you get all the resources after this that we promised, including some new ones that were brought up today.
Absolutely. We did get a couple more questions that just came in. Regina said, my question was partially answered. I would like to go back to the 1099 contractor discussion. You specified tasks and a specific manner for the learned professional contractor. Is this okay?
I'm going to look at the question.
It's in the Q&A, and
I
Regina,
see
if
it.
you want to,
I
if
see
you
it.
want to elaborate, Regina, you're welcome to unmute as well.
I don't know how to do that.
I can do that. I can do that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Unmute Regina so that I can ask her some follow-up questions. Regina, you're going to be live here in a second on our webinar.
All right, Regina, you can go ahead and unmute yourself if you would like to elaborate.
The reason is, Regina, I don't understand your question. I'm sorry.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
You are.
Yeah, we
you
hear
are.
you.
Hello.
Good. So my question relates to the contractor who has a professional license and or degree. I have, as the employer, I have specific tasks that are required to be performed in a specific manner during specific hours.
Okay.
And so while I am not necessarily, I'm not giving them the contracted person a degree or a certificate because of the type of work that they would be doing. They have to use prescribed steps in performing it.
Okay.
And those steps have to be taught to them, or they have to be trained in them. Could this type of person still be a 1099 employee?
I would have to learn a little more about it from you to be able to tell you that. So
Okay.
the answer is it could be yes or it could be no.
Okay.
So what I think just because we have a couple of minutes, why don't you tell me a little bit more? What is the resource? What type of resource are they? You mentioned the words degree and certificate, and I'm not quite sure what that's in reference to, but what
So they
type of
actually have a
resource are they?
license. That's the 1099 contractor actually would have a license or be licensed to perform the work by the state.
Okay.
They have to have a specific educational degree.
Okay. So they're a certain type of professional,
Yes.
and they have to have certain certifications to be able to do the work. That's okay.
Okay.
They could still be a contractor. Okay.
Okay.
Are they able to, if they are a resource that's able to work for other businesses, including yours, and provide that same service, but just when doing it with you, have to meet certain requirements for when they're doing it and what system they use, they could still be a contractor.
Okay. Okay, that answers the question.
Okay.
Thank you, Julie. And thanks, Regina, for your question. We have a couple other questions in the chat. So Katrina said, when it comes to non-medical transport, is the company responsible for automobile insurance, or can you make it a rule that each employee is responsible for having their own automobile insurance?
Unfortunately, I am not an insurance expert, so I don't know the answer to that question. I will tell you straight up, I would be chat GPTing that. But I'm sorry. That is not in my area of expertise. So I would be asking your attorney what licenses you need to protect yourself. I think that's the question. That would be my question.
She said, thank you.
You're welcome.
Another question is, when do you have to file unemployment with the state?
I'm going to just, this is how I'm interpreting the question. You don't file unemployment as the employer. The employee files unemployment when they exit. They fill out the paperwork, they start the process. I'm not sure if that answers the question. You get involved when you get paperwork saying said employee who left your organization has filed for unemployment. Can you tell us some details so that we can determine if they are eligible? And then you have to fill out some paperwork about that. Feel free to follow up with a follow-up if you have any others, any more details on that.
Any other questions? Bend Julie's ear. Well, in case people come up with other questions, we'll give them a moment. But in case they don't, I can sort of begin to wrap up here. Thank you so much, Julie, first of all, for all of this valuable content. It seems like you really hit the checklist of what folks were coming to learn today, and we hit it efficiently so everyone can move back on with their days, including you. And thank you for making yourself available for free one-on-one consults. We can send that information out to you folks and how to reach Julie in the follow-up email so you can take advantage of that. So thank you again. And coming up, we always have more webinars the third Wednesday of every month on various relevant topics such as this, including our June 18th webinar on being a mentally and emotionally healthy entrepreneur. You can find these webinars and other Jumpstart and partner events at jumpstartinc.org/events. At the end of today's session and in the follow-up email, you'll receive a brief survey along with the materials that Julie was talking about and the attachments once again. We appreciate your feedback. It allows us to continue to bring in experts and entrepreneurs to teach valuable lessons. On that note, we do have one more question to polish things off for the day. I don't want to cut them off. Someone asked, when does the employer pay the state unemployment tax?
You're paying that in every payroll. That's part of your payroll every single time you run payroll. So if you have a bunch of employees that have exited and they've claimed unemployment, that's when your unemployment rate will start to go up. But it doesn't, it goes up within your payroll, not, you don't write a check one day. It's based on, you get a rate. I hope that answered the question. And I would say to you, your accountant or your payroll person or your bookkeeper is who you should be paying to do that right for you.
Beautiful. Have a team around you, folks. That's what we're talking about today. Julie, thank you so much. Thank you for making us your very first webinar. It looks like you did a wonderful job and people are very pleased. So we will let you go, and I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the day and rest of the week, and we will see you next time. Thanks, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.